At this particular session, after roughly 3 hours of meandering discussions, I watched a large group of women suddenly break for the exit. The guards out front pushed them back inside, rolling down a heavy green metal gate to contain them. One of the stout, matronly officials running the meeting emerged and screamed at the women to take their seats. "We will record the name of anyone who leaves and say she didn't attend," she yelled. Occasionally, the committees did manage to overturn one of the brother leaders' more oddball suggestions. Once, for example, he announced that elementary schools should be shuttered and all children schooled at home. The outcry from the committee meetings killed that plan. Thanks to the revolution, the Libyan people, who formerly lived in a state of ignorance and barbarity, have become an organized and civilized people, proclaims Gaddafi's website, in bold contradiction to most evidence, at least on the organizational front. The achievements of the revolution are so apparent they have put an end to idle debate and all vain sophistry. And then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, sort of the outcome of this particular trip. In Libya, my 2-week visa eventually expired and I had to leave, never to be allowed to return. Jumal Bilkhair, the information ministry bureaucrat who controlled all foreign press visas, took exception to my description of the popular committee meetings, declaring that I had, quote, mocked Libyan democracy. Being completely banned from Libya was a disheartening fallout, no doubt, but I would not have written the article any other way. Since Bilkhair was the gatekeeper for all foreign journalists and had Gaddafi's ear, there was no going around him. He made a show of being polite whenever I ran into him at Arab summits in the ensuing years, but he never relented on the visa front. I hoped at some point he would change his mind so I could return to Braga, but so far, he never has. Perhaps it is best to leave the original Braga intact, preserved in my memory as if under glass. The perfect little beach town where our small front yard was crammed with sailboats on trailers, and my father came home and ate lunch with me every day. A little Texas oil town, inadvertently planted along the Mediterranean coast. In any case, the Braga of my childhood was long gone, as we always knew it would be one day, and there was no going back. I had always been a transient in my hometown. But in being thwarted from visiting Braga, I realized how my permanent sense that I was not from anywhere could be traced back to having grown up in a town not rooted in time or place. I was an expatriate no matter where I lived. Going back would not change that. And I think I will also read one short thing just because Iran has been in the news and I haven't given up too much time, if you're all in agreement. Since Iran has been in the news, this sort of, I think this gives you a little sense of the difference between hardliners, what the country's like under hardliners, and the more moderates. And this has to do with fatwas. And fatwas, when you talk to a lot of people about fatwas, I think it's a death sentence, because the most famous one is, of course, about the one that Ayatollah Khomeini leveled against Salman Rushdie for the Satanic Verses, and it was a death sentence. But they're not death sentences, they're really just religious rulings on all kinds of things. And people they used to just go to their local cleric and ask for it, and they'd ask about their business life, they'd ask about their sex lives, they'd ask about their dealings with their neighbors, and they usually just get one little sentence from the cleric. There's a house of fatwas attached to the religion ministry in Cairo, and it used to answer maybe, I think I have the numbers in here, I haven't looked at them lately, but I think it was like 25 a day, and now they're up to about 3,000 because they all come pouring in off the internet and off the TV shows. So there's been this huge proliferation of them. So here it is. During my many years reporting in the region, I bumped into fatwas constantly, even in the most unexpected places. Among the most striking, at least in terms of display, sat at the very entrance the slopes at Dizine, an Iranian ski resort in the Alborz Mountains. Skiing was an elitist sport associated with the hated Shah, so when the Islamic Revolution deposed him in 1979, everything was done to discourage it. Eventually, the resorts were reopened in a distinctly Islamic manner. The first time I went skiing in Dizine in 1993, the slopes were segregated by gender. The split started in line for the main gondola, with women boarding for 15 minutes and then men. The day I was there, someone had evidently forgotten to brief the South Korean ambassador, who got into a shoving match with the Revolutionary Guards because they kept pulling him out of the women's line where he was standing next to his wife. In those days, women had to wear a nylon version of the traditional chador. They billowed downhill like so many spinnakers flying loose. Men were constantly trying to sneak onto the women's slopes, some cross-dressing in the flapping nylon. So the Revolutionary Guards ran a small jail at the base, used to incarcerate the men they caught. Even I was thrown in it for a couple of hours. My transgression was reporting without a government permit. After the jail's commander ripped up my notebook before my eyes and released me, I made sure to only ask questions inside the gondola. The jail sat near a squat mosque at the bottom of the slopes. The local lore said it supplanted a bar. The boom of the noon call to prayer from its powerful megaphones echoed across the mountain so loudly that I feared it might trigger avalanches. On Fridays, the resort operators used the megaphones to remind all the skiers where they really ought to be spending the Sabbath. The weekly mosque sermon from Tehran University thundered out live over the slopes in those days. In those days, the buildings housing the various lifts were also painted with suitably Islamic revolutionary slogans like, "All Muslims revere the athlete." By the time I was skiing there again in 2002, things had loosened up considerably under the reform government of President Mohammad Khatami. Men and women were even snuggling together, an unheard of public infraction previously in the restaurants on the upper slopes. But just in case anyone headed onto the lifts harbored any doubt about whether skiing corresponded with Islamic family values, the Sports Authority had erected a giant billboard painted with a picture of both the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and a racer shredding downhill. The lettering, in both Persian and slightly butchered English, spelled out the Ayatollah's fatwa on skiing. I consider sport a necessity for the health of everyone's mind and body, and I agree with it. Nearby, a female guard stationed right before the main gondola reminded all the women heading down slopes not to show any hair, a warning they ignored the second they were on the mountain. The juxtaposition between the Supreme Leader's fatwa and the actual behavior underscored to me the gap between the mullahs and the way people actually lived. Still, even something as mundane as skiing took place under the umbrella of a religious endorsement. I think I will stop there.